Part 2. Hi, I'm Keek. Welcome to Countdown to Catastrophe, a video series where I explore the historical processes that brought us to our present day predicament. In episodes 6 or 10 of this series, we're outlining generally what I mean when I say present day predicament, looking at 4 existential crises. This video is sort of part 2 of the innate decay in capitalism. The one from before was about the innate decay globally as a part of U.S. global empire and imperialism. This one's going to be about the decay in the imperial core, that is the United States. Now, while capitalism is definitionally unequal, capitalism in the United States in the 21st century is uniquely unequal. One 2012 study found at the time, and it's only gotten worse since then, that economic inequality was worse today than it was in 1774, even if you account for slavery. And inequality in the US is worse than any other developed country in the world. Between 1979 and 2017, the wealth of the top 0.1% grew at a rate 15 times faster than the bottom 90%. And that was only exacerbated by the political, social, economic upheaval that was the pandemic.
The moon landing never happened.
Between March 2020 and October 2021, the wealth of billionaires increased from almost $3 trillion to over $5 trillion. A study put out by the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis in 2023 found that the top 10% of households held 69% of total household wealth, while the bottom 50% of households held only 2.5% of total household wealth. Now, Margaret Thatcher, may she rest in piss, once said, the left, quote, would rather the poor were poorer, provided the rich were less rich. And this is like the libertarian argument you see on Twitter all the time, like, oh, capitalism brought millions of people out of poverty and like trust the plan, stick with capitalism, everyone's like making more money. But it's not fucking true. Thatcher subscribed to the political economic theory of neoliberalism, which was described by David Harvey as a theory of political economic practices that proposes that human well-being can best be advanced by liberating individual entrepreneurial freedoms and skills within an institutional framework characterized by strong private property rights, free markets, and free trade. So what we saw beginning with Nixon, but really accelerating with Carter and Reagan through all the way till today, was deregulation, which led to increases in industrial accidents, declining wages, and economic crises like the one in 2008, where the government came in and bailed out the big banks, but didn't do fucking shit for everyone else. Tax cuts that widened inequality, free trade agreements that shipped not just manufacturing jobs, but disproportionately union jobs overseas, resulting in a decline in union membership from 28% in 1967 to 12% in 2010. Austerity measures like increased interest rates, which began under Carter, with his Federal Reserve Chairman Paul Volcker explicitly stating when he hiked rates, the American standard of living must decline. And the slashing of the social safety net, purging the list of families who needed federal assistance. Researchers Catherine Eden and Luke Schaefer in 2016 wrote of families that they had tracked who would have otherwise been eligible for welfare until Bill Clinton, quote, ended welfare as we know it. Nearly all had sold plasma, many were collecting tin cans making about $1 an hour. They were trading food stamps for money, and some were trading sex for payments of bills or food. And to look at it broadly, like it's not like these were shitty policies that were negatively affecting the working class, but overall things were getting better. If you look at the data, like Robert Gordon has in The Rise and Fall of American Growth, while from 1870 to 1970, there was a rapid increase in the standard of living, and this was largely due to things like technological innovations like indoor plumbing. Fools are shitting outside, and that made their standard of living roll. After 1970, corresponding to the neoliberal reforms, productivity declined, the national debt increased, personal debt increased, education stagnated, inequality widened, all of that equating to a declining standard of living. Neoliberalism observably made the poor poorer in order to make the rich richer. Now, the reason we keep getting these policies that do that is because the rich in the process entirely hijacked the political system, especially in the 21st century. In the 2010 Citizens United v. FEC ruling, federal and state regulations on corporate spending for elections were declared unconstitutional as it was deemed corporations had the same rights as people. And in 2014, the Supreme Court ruled limits on election spending were unconstitutional altogether. That year, studying 1,779 policy issues, Martin Gillis and Benjamin Page, famously at this point, found, quote, economic elites and organized groups representing business interests have substantial independent impacts on U.S. government policy, while average citizens and mass-based interest groups have little or no independent influence. And in a study led by Thomas Ferguson, conducted the next year, it was discovered that except for the 1982 Senate elections, between 1980 and 2014, in both the House and Senate, there was direct correlation between money spent on elections and the victor. Corporations decide who's in office and what they do with their power. Reflective of corporate power is the rising cost of elections. Spending on presidential elections peaked in 2020 at over $6 billion. Spending on congressional elections also peaked that year, and the second highest in U.S. history took place in the 2022 midterms. And this goes all the way down. In 2019, Amazon contributed $1 million to a political action committee working on Seattle City Council elections. The LA mayoral election cost over $100 million. And while the better part of that was spent by dickhead Rick Caruso, a billionaire paying out of pocket trying to buy Los Angeles, who lost because he said shit like
an African American woman or a white man.
I'm Italian.
The largest industry that donated to Karen Bass, who won, was the securities and investment industry. And this is important because it gets to the root of capitalist decay. The externalities of capitalism, poverty, criminality, immigration, a result of imperialism and neoliberal economics destabilizing the economies of Latin America. In a society governed by the corporate elite, will be responded to punitively and with the interests of profit in mind. And here race can't be ignored. Race is still a defining factor in the United States political economic system. That Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis found that black families and Hispanic families owned 24 cents to every dollar that white families owned, on average. When the state responds punitively to those externalities, it is often justified by tugging on bigotries and biases of polite white society. To give just a brief example, one 2021 study found of national and local news outlets that in 45% in cases covering black people accused of a crime, their face was broadcast, while mugshots of white people accused of a crime were only broadcast 8% of the time. The US has the second largest number of prisoners and the largest rate of prisoners per capita in the world. And while black people make up 13% of the population, 37% of people in jail or prison, and 20% of people on probation or parole are black. Now, 2 out of 3 prisoners are workers, 76% of whom face punishment if they decided they didn't want to work. On average, prison laborers in the United States make between 13 and 52 cents an hour. In December 2023, a lawsuit was brought against not just Alabama, but fast food franchises and a number of other corporations for benefiting off of prison laborers who were making no or next to no money working for them. In 2021, 27 states and the federal government incarcerated over 96,000 people in private prisons. And while Biden initiated the phasing out of the use of private prisons at the federal level, private corporations like the GEO Group, CoreCivic, and Management and Training Corporation continue to make massive profits with multi-million-dollar contracts at the state level. Now, according to the Washington Post, since 2015, fatal police shootings have been on an upward trend year by year. Last year was the deadliest year on record, with over 1,100 people killed by police in the United States. Nationwide, police budgets have increased on average since 2020 by 2%, while the LAPD's budget last year got a 6.3% increase. So I don't want to fucking hear about how defund was such a complicated slogan. They're still increasing the police budgets and murdering even more people. Now, Washington Post data finds that Black and Hispanic Americans are killed at disproportionate rates, with Black people killed at a 2-to-1 ratio compared to white people. And it's already started this year. Niana Finlayson, a Black woman who herself called the cops for help with domestic abuse, was killed by LA sheriffs within seconds of them entering her home. I don't have a pivot, but now I'm going to talk about immigration. While liberals demonized Donald Trump for his immigration policies, which were horrendous, his administration's policies were part of a broad arc stemming from Bill Clinton of repressive operations and mass deportation. It was Obama, in fact, who deported more people than any other president in U.S. history at 3 million. Now, Clinton's policies corresponded to NAFTA, which, as we talked about before, destroyed the economy of Mexico. While Nixon, Reagan, and Bush Sr. all sent troops to the border at different points, anti-immigration was not centered in Republican politics yet. In fact, in the 1980 GOP debate, Reagan and Bush tried to out-pro-immigrant each other.
But today, if those people are here, I would reluctantly say I think they would get whatever it is that they're, what the society is giving to their neighbors.
Rather than making them or talking about putting up a fence, why don't we work out some recognition of our mutual problems?
Like a bunch of woke liberals. For free trade to work, however, the corporations that are sent to other countries need a working class to work in their corporation. If they're coming into the US, who's going to get paid the slave wages that the corporations are offering in Mexico?
Do not come. Do not come.
And what's crazy is the number of people incarcerated in ICE detention facilities under Biden has only grown, and many of those are incarcerated in facilities run by the same private prison corporations that I mentioned earlier. Now, right now, the Democrats are trying to act like they're being forced to crack down on immigration at the border, offering funding for border security in exchange for arms being sent to Israel and Ukraine. But that's not really what's happening. In October of last year, Biden started an extension of Trump's border wall. In May, following the end of the Trump-era policy, Title 42, which allowed the turning away of immigrants at the border on the basis of there being a pandemic, Biden instituted further restrictions on undocumented crossing. And according to a report from last February, there are 1,000 children still yet to be reunited with their parents after they were separated by Trump's zero-tolerance policy in 2018. During the Trump administration, 6 children died in ICE custody. Last year, a 17-year-old died while Biden was president. And don't forget, Biden was president in 2021 when the video of those fucking assholes on horses were caught whipping Haitian migrants. In January 2021, my mom and I drove cross-country to be in the Capitol when Biden got inaugurated, because after January 6th, we kind of wanted to see what was gonna happen. Not much actually happened in the Capitol, but what was interesting was how much of America is falling apart. Poor infrastructure, people living in horrible conditions. I saw entire communities where there were more abandoned buildings than there were inhabited ones. And we see it everywhere. Nationwide, homelessness is on the rise. In Los Angeles alone, we've broke the 70,000 number. Addiction, suicide, sicknesses like COVID, and a general lack of healthcare, and poverty have contributed to a consistent decline in life expectancy in the past 3 years in the United States. At a certain point, the externalities of capitalism become too great, and the policies advocated for by the ruling class to remedy them become too authoritarian. Fascism is a tool of revitalization of the capitalist system. It relies on a popular movement, almost always a minority of people, with the backing of big money, who have the explicit aim of overthrowing representative democracy so that they can institute repressive policies. So next week, or whenever we get it out, we're slogging through these Update on Catastrophe episodes, but we're going to be looking at the right-wing movement in the United States and something I've been calling postmodern fascism, because I'm an asshole. So if you want to learn more about pomo-fascism, you should like, comment, and subscribe for more content, and so publishers will look twice at my book.